Hello, everybody. Here we are on the next installment of American political policies. We were talking before in the past week about American domestic issues, which had to do, of course, with the Articles of Confederation era, which quickly moved into the Constitution era. We talked about Shays' Rebellion and the Whiskey Rebellion and so much more. Well, now we're looking at some issues that were happening around the same decades, which is, of course, foreign policy issues. We need to remember that the United States was a very new country, and other countries had no idea how really the United States should be treated, whether the U.S. was a country to respect or to fear or to use, that sort of thing, right? This is that era of expansion and empires and conquest. So the U.S. was in a place where it needed to fit in somewhere within the European, really, view of the world at the time. Now, here are some of the things going on that will affect U.S. foreign policy. One of these is the French Revolution. Then there's this Jay Treaty that has to do with America's first major treaty with England after the Revolutionary War. This is a quasi-war, which just means an undeclared war that happens between America and France, of all countries. There's an XYZ affair, which I'm looking forward to talking to you about, and the Barbary War, which there's a video for in your lecture folder in Canvas, and that'll explain it better, but I'll give you some brief notes here as well, just to tie it all into the major lecture. Well, here's the thing we need to know when it comes to foreign policy up through about 1800, which is that the United States was still a raw goods economy. It was agricultural. Mercantilism, if you remember that from our colonial period, is still what's really happening. The United States is producing raw goods and not just selling those goods to England anymore, but also to whoever in Europe and in the Ottoman Empire that will buy those products. America has no military because it was hoped by Americans that taxes could stay low, and that that no one would ever attack. That there would be no need for the United States to have a military. This was kind of a interesting idealism of the time that was proven very unrealistic very quickly. The whole idea of the Second Amendment originally, in fact, was so that the United States could provide a militia whenever there was a need for an armed force in the United States. Of course, now that we have a military, the idea of a militia is still kind of rare. We don't see those anymore so much, at least not federally. The United States at the time is operating on 10 million per year, which is still a very low number. It's almost like third world country numbers when it comes to this era. And the economy is quite poor because the United States, again, is trying to find markets for raw goods. And to do that, the United States has to get through all of those issues, such as setting up trade deals with other countries and getting through conflict that's happening at the time, meaning U.S. sailing vessels need to be able to make it through naval wars between England and France and other people to trade. It's an unstable era. Okay? Now, with that said, with the fact that the United States is like this, what happens here? Well, this French Revolution is going to begin in 1789, and you'll hear more about that in a Western Civ or World History class. But the basic deal is that the common classes, meaning the non-nobles, are going to rise up in rebellion against the nobility, to put it real simply. Now, what's going to happen ultimately is that a young lawyer of the middle class is going to take power, and that fellow is named Robespierre. And Robespierre is going to ultimately form a new government called the Directory, and he's going to form within that directory the Committee for Public Safety, which is a bit of an ironic name because the Committee for Public Safety is going to, for a time, take away the rights of the citizens of this new republic that they're setting up, and they're going to deny trials, and they're going to attack everybody that criticizes this new government. So that could be people from the common classes who are part of the rebellion, and of course it's going to be the nobility and the church, because the idea is a big giant purge that will happen of anyone that does not support this new ideal. So this is a pretty brutal revolution, and it's not in any way similar to the American War of Independence. When we go here towards the bottom of the slide, you'll notice that I put here that 9 wars were in progress at the same time as the French Revolution. Now, what that means, you guys, is that the French Revolution is occurring where you have common classes fighting against the nobility, and then you have foreign nations sending armies into France specifically to stop the revolution. The reason for that is because the French Revolution is a little bit terrifying in Europe because something like this has not really happened before, at least not for a long time. And so what that means is that you've got an organized revolutionary army gaining control of the country of France, destroying the ancient nobility, and there are lots of people that might want to do this in other countries. We today often like to call this the domino theory, the idea that the French Revolution will have knocked over a domino, which will then start to knock over other dominoes set in a line, which would be like other countries going up in rebellion as well. So the nobility of these other countries were very concerned, and as a result, Spain, as you see here in this map, and Britain, and Holland, the Netherlands really, parts of Germany and Prussia, and even Sardinia are going to send armies at the same time into France to try to help overthrow the French Revolution. And it's not going to work. There's simply too many people who are fighting in the French revolutionary forces. And with people like Napoleon serving in the French revolutionary armies, there's just no way for these guys to win, these external forces to win. So the point being is that this era is not just a revolution in France of people against their nobles, it's also an era of Europeans trying to force France to continue being a monarchy, which means it's a civil war and a bunch of other wars at the same time. Okay? Here's the problem with the United States in this situation. The United States signed this thing called the Treaty of Alliance when the French decided to join the American War of Independence. So basically, for the French to send over tens of thousands of soldiers, muskets, gunpowder, money, food, everything the U.S. would need to help defeat the British, and the French Navy, the deal is that the United States was supposed to help France out when she had a need. So the United States is essentially honor-bound to ally with France per this Treaty of Alliance. And now we're at a point where France is asking, okay? And the French ambassador sent by the revolutionary government is a guy named Genet. And Edmond Genet, also known as Citizen Genet, is going to show up in Washington, D.C., that's being built at this time, and he's going to demand that America fulfills its obligations in this Treaty of Alliance. Now, the United States can't do this. The United States cannot get involved in this thing. This is not just a civil war in France or even just a revolution. This is a bit of a nightmare. It's a war of attrition of people wiping out an entire other class of people, and it's going to be going on for quite a while. The deal is that for the United States, with the U.S.'s reality, again, mercantilism, no military, very small amount of money, low tax base, poor economy, okay? For the United States to get involved in the French Revolution would be very much like us trying to get involved in the Syrian Civil War or setting up an army in the middle of Serbia and trying to maintain a certain amount of peace there between the Serbians and Croatians who are constantly trying to kill each other. It's just not a good idea for us to get involved in that kind of thing unless we're really ready to put a whole lot of effort into it, and that's just not going to happen. People are just going to die on our side, and they're not going to know why. And so another historic comparison is like us going into Vietnam. It just did not work out. And so the United States does not want to do this. So I guess the question is how do we get out of it? Okay? And it's not just us having to find a way to tell France, no, we're not going to honor the Treaty of Alliance. We have to tell France no while letting other countries know that our treaties are solid and that we're not going to damage our newfound reputation by not only denying France, but also denying any other treaties that we've made with other countries. So how do we let other countries know at this moment that we're only telling France no for a reason that makes sense? What is the reason? It's kind of elegant. I enjoy this one a little bit when it comes to the world of politics. Here's our answer. George Washington is the one that has to tell Citizen Genet this. We made the Treaty of Alliance with your king, who is no longer in power. When the French revolutionary forces actually eventually commit regicide against the king and queen of France, the result is that theoretically, in the game of politics, the Treaty of Alliance ceased to exist. It was null and void because that was made with the king and the king's government and the United States. So there was no treaty, in theory, with the revolutionary government of France, and therefore the United States can say, nah, we're not going to come help you because there is no treaty. And so there, right? And so that's what we did. Now, the French don't accept that, okay? They're not really happy with this sidestepping. And Genet is going to stay in the United States, and he's going to try to get the support of the American people by appealing to their honor. And he's going to be going to newspapers, and he's going to be going on stump speeches, and he's going to be holding a large number of parties that are designed to get wealthier Americans to come and donate money. He's going to be bringing in French warships that are attacking the British off of Canada to come into U.S. ports to be repaired. And everything he does makes it look like the United States is involved in this war. And there's one final thing I need to tell you if that's the case. If the United States says yes to the French Revolution, or at least looks like it is, keep in mind that the United States will not just be helping the American revolutionary forces. The United States will be at war with everybody out here. Because the minute we join France, we are at war with Britain, with northern Germany, with Spain, with Mediterranean islands like Sardinia, and more. That's what happens. That's the consequence if the United States joins in, or looks like it's joining in with the French Revolution. And the United States exists only if it can trade at this point. It has no other real economy. So that's the deal. That's why we have to say no. Now, how do we handle Citizen Genet, who is basically, he's actually raising up a number of people who are willing to fight the U.S. government to be able to go to France and get involved in this massive conflict. And so the United States, for the first time ever, is going to pass our very first deportation act, and it's called the Alien and Sedition Acts, which are more than just trying to get rid of Citizen Genet. It's also designed to silence critics, of which Genet is one. So Citizen Genet is tough to beat because he's got a lot of people that are sympathetic to the French cause in the United States. He also very uniquely married the daughter of the governor of New York as a French citizen, marrying this daughter, which this is one of the most powerful people in the United States at the time, which was a very smart political move. He threatens to tear the U.S. apart by constantly in the media talking about how the United States is wrong. And a number of U.S. citizens who don't quite get the situation are willing to back Genet up, and that's not good for this time period. Congress and President Adams, therefore, are going to be the ones that finally pass this Alien and Sedition Act, and that means the United States can silence Genet, which means that they are going to kick Genet out of the United States. But since Genet married someone here, and if Genet goes home to the Committee for Public Safety with failure, meaning without a U.S. alliance, Genet will probably be executed. That's something that's already been happening. So Genet doesn't want to go back to France, and as a result, he's going to settle down quietly and live out his days here in the U.S. So that's what's going to happen as a result of the United States pulling itself together, saying, no, we cannot join in the French Revolution, and passing the Alien and Sedition Acts. The other thing that the Alien and Sedition Acts, unfortunately, are used for is to silence American newspapers, because the idea of the freedom of speech and the freedom of the press was still being ironed out, if you will. And so the Sedition Acts allowed President Adams, our second president, to imprison newspaper editors. And that's going to basically cost him a second term. Adams will not get reelected because this is so unpopular. But he's got the power to do this at the time, and it's kind of a weird thing to happen. Here's just a copy of Citizen Genet's inflaming United States readers and U.S. newspapers about how he and the French are being treated poorly by the American government, who should be allying with the French, their brethren in the war in France. Here's George Washington telling Citizen Genet no, right? And then that takes us to this, right? Is that this picture here is just a picture of one American newspaper. There's many that are doing this, basically making fun of Congress, basically showing that Congress is full of a bunch of drunk, angry people who aren't getting anything done and are like a bunch of fools who won't support our allies like France. Okay? So these are the people that are being put in prison by President Adams. Okay, so that's one issue that's going on. What are the long-term effects then of America denying aid to France? Pretty simple. The United States and France are now going to be political enemies. That whole thing where the United States and France have a certain amount of respect for each other, but also kind of a lack of respect for each other, this is where that really gets solidified. It's not that that didn't exist before, it's just that that is now a thing that's going to be going on with this moment. France is going to use a number of opportunities to show their anger against the United States. One of them will be this thing we'll talk about in a bit called the XYZ affair, and the other will be the quasi-war. Okay, something else going on at the same time besides the U.S. saying we cannot join the French is this, the Tripoli issue. What does that mean? It's real simple, and again, there's a video in this week's folder that talks more about this, but here's the quick notes. In the 1870s, American ships going into the Med Sea are going to be attacked by the countries of Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Tripoli. Those were countries in North Africa at the time. Those countries existed and had existed since the 1500s by terror, really. I mean, frankly, that's what they were doing. They would kidnap sailors and passengers on ships. They would take those ships and then send ransom notes around the European world mostly, and now the American world. And what they're doing is they're demanding a bunch of money in return for those people's lives. And if those people are not ransomed by their home countries or their families, then those people are to be sold into slavery in North Africa. So that's basically the deal. And again, this has been going on for quite a while. The way that France and England and Spain and others have gotten around this is they've either fought with their navies over and over and over again to reduce the pirates a little bit, which has never been long lasting, or they simply have paid ransoms, paid tribute, paid money every year to these North African countries. And that's basically what they're doing by the time we get to the 1700s. Why has the United States never heard of these guys as far as a warlike nation? And the reason being is that the United States was protected by the British Navy while the U.S. was a bunch of British colonies. During the Revolutionary War, the French protected the American merchant ships coming into the Med Sea, but now the United States is free of its constraints. It is now its own country, and nobody is protecting the U.S., including the U.S., because the U.S. has no military. So now American merchant ships full of cargoes, full of very, very expensive cargoes, are going to be open for attack by these pirates. So that starts up at the same time as all these other issues, and the United States has to figure out how to handle it. What's the first thing, of course, the United States is going to do? Well, it's going to pay money. That's what it's going to do. So the United States is, instead of starting a military under John Adams, the United States is going to pay about 20% of our budget every year for years, for over a decade, will be sent to 4 pirate states to protect our people. And that is going to not work well, because over and over and over again, those very same 4 pirate states will continue to attack Americans, and the Americans will simply send more. This is a really interesting story, and if anyone is interested in learning more about this, just let me know and I can recommend some books, because this whole issue gets so much deeper than what I'm telling you about right now, and it's a crazy story. In any case, the attacks continue during this period, this decade-long period, and of course the American public are frustrated, Congress is frustrated, foreign governments, on top of that, view the United States as being incredibly weak. We cannot defend our own people, and that is not something that looks good on the national stage. A couple more things to tell you about that won't get solved until much later. England, as a sign of how much they don't respect us and view us as being weak, partially because of this and other issues, is that they have not even withdrawn their troops from U.S. territory yet. They are still making money around the Great Lakes in territory that the United States owns, meaning through fur trade. And England's Navy has begun, again this is another issue, has begun kidnapping U.S. merchant sailors for their Navy. Why do they do this? because doing so risks them nothing. They get free sailors, and they don't have to worry about the U.S. doing anything, because if the U.S. won't fight pirates, the United States certainly is not going to fight the British Navy. So that's happening, right? Meanwhile, the French are still mad at us. So what are the French going to do? We're going to talk about that here in a second. During this period, the United States wants to get some trade going with France and England. And so we're going to hire some ambassadors, right, to go to France and England. We've already had someone go to Spain, and that was that great deal that allowed the U.S. to use the Mississippi and ended the Whiskey Rebellion. Well, we now need to send people to France and England. Who do we send ambassadors to first? We should have sent people to both countries at the same time, by the way. It just, we didn't think about it, apparently. So John Jay, Ambassador John Jay, is going to go to England. And what John Jay is going to do is he's going to negotiate a trade deal, which is a pretty poor trade deal. The weights and measures are not set in our favor. It's mostly because we have no power to negotiate a better trade deal. But in this trade deal, the English will agree to withdraw their forces from the Great Lakes that America owns. The English will also agree to stop kidnapping U.S. sailors. The English have no reason to actually follow through with this, and they do not. Just so you know, right? Anyway, John Jay goes to England first. The consequence of that is that France feels like the United States is going back to their abuser, England, and the United States is basically, instead of helping France, instead of allying with France, or even at least setting up a trade deal with France first, the United States is still going back to England over and over and over again instead of France. And France, oh, they get so angry about this, okay? So France is really ticked off. America has already said no to Citizen Genet and passed a law to kick the guy out of the country, so to speak, and has nullified the Treaty of Alliance. And France was really hoping and expecting U.S. help in their revolution. France is going to authorize private ships of war. This is private citizens with ships with cannons on them that are going to go to the United States coastline and begin to attack U.S. shipping. This is all part of a long series of insults the French want to do to show us how angry they are. If there's anybody that is really good at insulting people, I think the French are one of those peoples that can do it well. This is a very well, long planned out series of insults. So private ships of war, not the actual navy of France, but private ships of war are going to be going out to actually attack American merchant ships. This is not a declared war, so we call it the quasi-war. Let's move on. The United States can't do anything about it. We have no military. So we do finally send ambassadors. Only after this happens, we finally send ambassadors to France. Okay? These ambassadors go to France. And what the French embassy says, this is great, guys. What the French embassy says is, well, let me first say this, XYZ. The X and the Y and the Z all refer to 3 French ambassadors that meet 3 American ambassadors. The American ambassadors are going to France mainly to say, we want to trade, but also stop attacking our ships. Okay? Well, what the French ambassadors do is they ask for a bribe of millions of US dollars before they'll negotiate and stop attacking. What this is, guys, let's think this a little bit deeper, okay? What this is the French are attacking US ships and then demanding a bribe so that we will stop attacking, so that they will stop attacking U.S. ships. Why are they doing this? Do they really need the money? A little, but what they're really doing it for is they're showing us how weak we are. They're actually referring to the Barbary pirates, who we are simply sending 20% of our budget to pirates in North Africa. And if we can do that, like a bunch of weaklings, then by God, the French can insult us by reminding us that that's the kind of people we are. And the Americans kind of knew that this was a problem already, but when this XYZ affair happens, when this hits the newspapers, that the French, a major European nation, is now reminding Americans about how weak we are viewed in the world, about the fact that we're just paying tribute to pirates instead of fighting pirates, that we cannot even protect our own people, and therefore they're attacking us, the French are attacking us and demanding bribes. That is enough for the United States, I think, to be both embarrassed and enraged. And so as a result, finally, as a result of this moment, the XYZ affair, you're going to see people like Alexander Hamilton saying that we need to have a navy. We got to have one. We have to defend our people, right? And so he puts this down. If we mean to be a commercial people or even to be secure on our Atlantic side, we must endeavor to have a navy. And so it moves on, right? We have more people saying that. Thomas Jefferson's going to be elected president, and with Alexander Hamilton as an aide of his, Thomas Jefferson is going to authorize the Navy. And so we're finally going to see a military. And the first thing the military is going to do, the American Navy, is with mostly a bunch of purchased or converted ships. It's going to take years to actually build a fresh Navy. But we can buy a bunch of ships and put cannons on them, and that's what we do. And so this Navy is going to stop the French attacks. The French were really just trying to show us how angry they were. They weren't doing a full military attack upon the United States because the French are already involved in a bunch of wars in Europe. They can't afford another war. And so they offer peace at this moment. So only when the United States threatens to build a military do the French back off. That's something that people seem to understand. Now that that's happened, it's time for us to go further. We're going to build those ships and we're going to go after those Barbary pirates. And so the United States has to make some decisions. They can choose to build European-style frigates or European-style third-rate ships of the line. That was possible. Or even to build things like this, which would have been almost impossible for the U.S. to do. Large battleships like the HMS Victory. What the United States is going to do is kind of curious. It's a whole new class of warship. The United States Navy, its first ships of its Navy, is going to take this frigate and it's going to hybridize it with this third-rate ship of the line, and it's going to create this, which is the USS Constitution, which you can go see in Boston Harbor today. And the USS Constitution is a fairly massive frigate. And although it's a frigate-class ship, it's a huge one. And the guns, as opposed to British 18-pounder short-range guns, this thing has 24-pounder long-range guns, a huge sail plan on it, long hull, very, very deep in the water, can sail very quickly, and maneuver quickly while firing at long distance. And so this is a very unique vessel. Different from what others have built, and it's got these huge cannons on it, massive cannons. And these things, these are the kinds of cannons that you would see in fortresses. So that's something new, a fast-moving frigate that is actually built much bigger and heavier than most European frigates would have been. What are we going to do with these things? We're going to, of course, scare off France, and then we're going to go deal with the Barbary pirates. What happens there? Well, our ships are going to be fighting over in North Africa for quite a while. We're going to see a number of smaller conflicts that take a long time, but by 1805, the United States will have won the Barbary War. And the deal is that you're going to see Captain Bainbridge sailing in. This is the biggest loss the United States is going to have here. 1/6 of the U.S. Navy is going to sail into Tripoli Harbor, and this is going to be the USS Philadelphia, a massive, brand spanking new warship captained by William Bainbridge. And this ship is going to run aground, and it's going to be captured by the enemy, and the enemy is going to use it as a gun platform, and eventually the United States will send in a sneak attack to set it on fire, and so the enemy can't use it. One of my favorite stories that come along with this, again, I remind you, the only captain that lost his ship in the war against the Barbary pirates, America's first real war after the Revolution, is Captain William Bainbridge. The next time we're ever attacked by pirates on any scale at all is not for 200 years. You're not going to see pirates attack the United States until 2006, when a number of Somalian pirates attacked the Maersk, Alabama, and wind up capturing Captain Phillips. Of course, there's a movie on this, right? What I love about this story, and I wish I knew more about the background of it, but what I love about this story is that the U.S. warship that shows up to handle this problem, which eventually results in the death of all three pirates and the rescuing of Captain Phillips, is, again, it's no tributes. There's no tributes. There's no negotiation with these guys. The United States learned against the Barbary pirates that you cannot spend money and negotiate and then have them honor their agreements. What happens is the U.S. Navy sends this ship. The name of the ship, you guys, I kid you not, is the USS Bainbridge. I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but I really want to know. So you've got Captain William Bainbridge, the only captain to lose his ship in the war against the Barbary pirates. The next time we deal with pirates, 200 years later, and it's the USS Bainbridge that handles it. That is a great story, right? Come on. Oh, thanks, Java. Okay, so here we go. The Barbary states are defeated. France has backed off. We're gaining some respect. In fact, a number of European leaders have actually said that the United States, in defeating the Barbary pirates, the Pope actually will say that the United States defeating the Barbary pirates is going to be the biggest contribution to Christianity in the age, which is not bad because Europe is all Christian and they are all also, to a certain amount, holding respect towards this Catholic leader. You've got other people such as Admiral Lord Nelson saying that this war, finally won by the United States, is a major event that is worthy of respect. You're going to see those in the short video I have for you. So the only group left, the only guys left that we need to get to respect us in this case is Britain, who is still hurting U.S. trade and will increase that damage, has not left the United States territory that we won during the War of Independence, and is still kidnapping U.S. sailors. So we have to handle this, and I'm going to cover that in a brief review of the War of 1812 next. Thanks a lot.